Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are finally here. There is a 2024 bracket made for the
Sweetheart, relax. It's a little to check on Spencer. And Jen, just be getting set.
I was muted there. Sorry about that. I was muted there. But again, welcome. We've got a large crew for you guys today on the 2024 House of College Hoops bracket selection show. Sam Basil joined alongside Michael DeRosa, Trevor Everett, Peyton and Josh Burton, and Riley Frayne of Mid-Major Madness. Thanks for coming on, Riley. So we're going to get right into it. As you can see right here on our lovely proprietary House of College Hoops bracket, got it. We've got the field of 68 right here. I'm sure a lot of you watched the selection show on CBS, and this is, depending on how you feel, there were some snubs, there were some surprises, and there was a lot of discussion heading into the weekend about a lot of teams that were really pushing, and then some found their way in, and then some were just kind of left on the bubble here. Notable teams that punched their ticket today. Auburn, a team that we all thought were going to get in anyway as an at-large team, but one that did so with the SEC tournament title. Yale coming in with a buzzer beater against Brown in the Ivy League tournament, and Duquesne coming in as the 6th seed in the Atlantic 10 tournament, taking down VCU in the final to clinch the 4th different team to win the A10 title in 4 years. So, guys, any preliminary thoughts on this bracket? We've had a couple teams left on the bubble. The last 4 in the bracket were Boise State, Colorado, Virginia, and Colorado State. And the first 4 out were Oklahoma, Seton Hall, Indiana State, and Pittsburgh. We're going to go right around the horn here. Michael, any initial thoughts on this year's bracket?
Yeah, the Big East got screwed. Virginia's in my tournament over St. John's, Seton Hall. Hell, even Providence is better than them. The Big East got screwed. Only 3 teams in for what the league that was the second best league in Ken Palm. That's ridiculous. The Big East they completely got a raw deal here. The committee aired here. There should be at least 4 Big East teams in this tournament. That's inexcusable.
Yep. Trevor, any thoughts on the Big East and other conferences that might have not gotten as many picks, or conferences that you think got too many bids?
I'll leave the Big East part of it, Michael. I think he's done a really great job of coverage, especially for the totality of House of College Hoops. But I think the Mountain West, I'll just say what they got right. I think the Mountain West, they got right with the 6. Obviously, I think New Mexico helped that a lot. Their chances there, it seems like they, when the committee president was talking after the fact, it seemed like that was kind of a thing that really saved them a little bit almost. I know we can get into that later, but I think the Mountain West, they got it right. I'll be the Mountain West guy once again. And then also just I think the seating on them a little bit was a little funky. I'm curious to what everybody's thoughts are of that when we get to it.
Absolutely. Some notable other mid-majors that got multiple bids. Obviously, the Mountain West got 6. The American got 2. The West Coast got 2. And the Atlantic 10 also got 2 teams.
Mountain West is a power conference.
Yeah, Mountain West is on their way to being a power conference. Peyton, any initial thoughts on this bracket?
Yeah, I got a couple initial thoughts. As far as the Big East goes, I definitely thought they at least probably deserved 4 teams in the bracket. Obviously, the top 3 being Creighton, Marquette, and UConn. But it's curious to see why Providence, especially St. John's, I thought the Rick Pitino factor would actually play in a little bit in this one. It did not. They only got 3 teams. And as far as we go to conferences, the 2 best conferences in college basketball, the Big 12 and the SEC got the most teams in this bracket, both tied at 8. As far as this bracket goes, the only ones, besides a couple of seeding facts, the only things I'm really mad about is I am really pissed off that Virginia got in. I don't care if they're in a play-in game. They play the most ugliest style of basketball in the country. Who in the hell wants to watch them in the NCAA tournament? And I really hope, we'll probably get into it later, but I really hope Colorado State beats them. That way I don't have to see them anymore. But that's the quick thoughts I have.
Josh, as Peyton said, Virginia, kind of one of the controversial last 4 teams in, especially over a first 4 out team, Indiana State. Any last thoughts? Sycamore's not making it through?
So, I mean, I think all of us wanted Indiana State to make it, but the unfortunate fact is we had 5 bid stealers. And if you heard the committee of the chair talk about it, in the last couple of years alone, there's been a combined 3. And we had 5 this weekend and this last couple of weeks alone. So, unfortunately, that knocked Indiana State out. I kind of understand. And I'm going to go back and forth a little bit with DeRosa here. Big East may have been number 2 in KenPom, but outside the top 3 or 4 teams, it was a pretty weak league this year, if we're being totally honest. And I can't really vouch for maybe Seton Hall or St. John's or Providence 1 and 3 maybe should have got in definitely over Virginia because I'm not a fan of them being in either. But the fact is, they all 3 were kind of mid teams this year, if we're being completely honest. So I don't have a big gripe about them unless you're arguing that Virginia should have been in over them, and then we'll talk about that. But as far as that, I look at Purdue's region. We'll get into it here in a little bit. You know what? If they can exercise some demons, this is the region to do it in. They got a favorable draw.
And Jake Zimmer, welcome to the show. Co-founder of House Enterprise, co-host of the Beers, Business, and Balls podcast. Jake, any initial thoughts on this bracket?
I mean, my first initial thoughts is, wow, how lucky are we to have the University of Connecticut in our backyard here in the East Regional, Boston. It'll be interesting. We'll see. I'm looking at the potential Auburn draws, their biggest challenge, maybe Iowa State down the road, and figure, hey, what is the there's claims to UConn being the most dominant team in the last few years. That's going to be put to the test here this year. So, yeah, a lot of avenues we can go down with the potential snubs of the Big East. How far Purdue's going to go. Interested to see what the crew's got to say as we dive into these topics more. But yeah, I'm looking at UConn as the team to beat here. Right off the bat, it's have we seen a more dominant team? I can't say that I'm fully sold on anyone being more dominant than UConn in the past few years. So yeah, looking forward to a variety of takes here this evening, Basil.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, we've got Riley from Mid-Major Madness here with us. Riley, me and you spent the week down in Brooklyn covering this year's Atlantic 10 tournament. Duquesne coming out of nowhere again, like I said, taking down VCU in the final. Any initial thoughts on where they fell in the bracket, as well as the A10's at-large team, the Dayton Flyers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally just getting my first opportunity to kind of look at the bracket here. Like you said, Sam, we're literally just getting off of the A10 championship today, and I'm just having my first sit down and look here. Initial impressions, maybe Duquesne a little high. I know they showed a lot of tenacity late in the season. They're coming off of 8 straight wins now when you add up, what they did in the conference tournament as well. It's going to be a tough matchup against the BYU program. I'd be lying if I said I watched them a lot this year, but Duquesne's going to need to carry that physicality and that defense we saw all throughout championship week here in Brooklyn. And they're going to need to carry it over into the tournament to have a chance against, a bigger team like BYU. Duquesne, a ton of depth. And I'm not saying they necessarily can't win, but, as we know, those lower seeds, it's always an uphill battle. And so initial thoughts, maybe just Duquesne a little overranked. I think there could have been a little more value there for them at maybe a 12 or a 13 seed. Of course, now looking at Dayton, I think that's a really interesting spot for them as well. It's certainly been a little bit of an up and down year, particularly with them kind of floundering at the A10 tournament this year, despite all the upsets. But I still think they get a pretty good matchup in Nevada. I know, obviously, the Mountain West really tough this year, like you guys talked about. Nevada has a ton of good players. Gerard Lucas is clutch and knows how to lead that team. But you got a guy like Deron Holmes, who could be one of the most exciting big men in the tournament this year. I know he always gets a lot of hype, but it's certainly going to lift this Dayton program heading forward into what could be a potentially an upset matchup against a pretty good Nevada team.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into a little bit more in-depth about, some of those matchups, specifically with Duquesne, because they are in the first region that we're going to be talking about here, the East region. Obviously we've got number 1 overall seed UConn taking on 16 seed Stetson, and then some other notable matchups. We've got 2 seed Iowa State versus South Dakota State. We've got Illinois versus Morehead State, Auburn versus Ivy League champions Yale. Looking at those top 4 seeds, something that Josh and I were talking about heading into our tournament prep was trying to figure out for anybody who watches maybe like the Champions League or, FIFA World Cup soccer. There's always kind of this discussion about what they like to call the group of death, right? 4 really tough teams that get pitted against each other that there's going to be somebody that could probably make it a lot further get left out because they're going to fall to another top team in this region. I don't want to give it right to the first region that, we're talking about here, but Josh, you feel like there's any, chance that this region has a case to be the region of death?
Yeah, so I think when first glance at this, with UConn and Auburn and then Iowa State, Illinois as a potential Sweet 16, it sets up for a lot of fireworks there in the East region. I think if it's not the East, I mean, honestly, you could probably give it to the South in a way, because in the South you have Houston, Marquette, Kentucky, and Duke. And I know Kentucky, Duke lost their first games in their conference tournaments, but Marquette, especially if they get a healthy Tyler Kolek, that is an elite Sweet 16 games right there, a pair of games. So if it's not the East, it's the South, in my opinion. But yeah, I think when you look at the East, man, UConn, Auburn, Iowa State, Illinois, you have your offense and your defensive-minded teams like Iowa State. You have your juggernaut in UConn. Auburn's riding a high wave coming off the SEC tournament. And then maybe you rekindle the flame and maybe FAU or San Diego State finds their way back through another tournament run. So yeah, I think the East is really difficult for UConn to be the overall number one. But it'd either be the East or the South, and I'm still debating on which one I would consider the kind of group of death in this tournament.
Absolutely. And Mr. DeRosa, let's talk about some potential paths for some of these top teams. Obviously, UConn, every game they play in this one, they are going to be the highest seeded team. However, there may be a team or two that can give them some trouble. So if you're a Huskies fan, what is a team that you would not want to see, say, in the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight as you try to get out of this region?
If I'm a Huskies fan, the one matchup I was desperately not asking for that I unfortunately got is this Auburn team. When I look at the way UConn's able to play, UConn, they run a ton of off-ball action that you really have to switch to be able to guard them. If you can't switch 1 through 4, 1 through 5, you're not going to be able to guard them. You want to know what Auburn can do? They can switch 1 through 5. They are deep. They are incredibly athletic. Auburn is the much more athletic team than the much more physical team. I think Auburn can really disrupt the way UConn likes to run offense. And if Auburn can get going downhill, that's going to create a lot of problems. I might actually pick Auburn to beat UConn. I really like the way Auburn matches up. Auburn is a team I've been a sucker for since the very first game when I thought I underrated them in the season. I definitely did. I think this Auburn team creates real problems for UConn. I think that is a spot where if I'm a UConn fan, I'm terrified of Bruce Pearl's squad.
Yeah, and obviously Auburn going up against Yale in the first round of this tournament. Ivy League teams kind of tend to be some tournament darlings, especially if they can get, 1 or 2 early wins. Are there any ways in which you think this Yale team could give Auburn some trouble?
You see, Yale, I don't think has the typical giant killer formula, because I don't think Yale is an excellent 3-point shooting team. And I think Auburn has a couple guys that can put on Matt Noling. So I think that takes away some of the matchup there. You would need a Pukatalis. I don't think I pronounced that name right, but I said it confidently, so it sounds like I did. Or a Mahoney to hit a ton of threes. And I don't think that's the kind of team Yale is. I think Auburn was a team that definitely has an incredibly high ceiling and incredibly low floor. I think they got away with one in this Yale matchup. I think this is one they should be able to cruise in.
Absolutely. And Josh, or let's go over to you, Trevor. There's a lot of really interesting matchups. Obviously, if we want to go just 1, 2, 3, 4 in the Sweet 16, those would be some pretty great games. But if things shake out the way that you would want them to, what do you think would be the most exciting matchup in this region?
Honestly think it would be Drake and Iowa State in the round of 32. I think if Drake can figure out how to beat the Washington State defense, we know Drake's an incredible team led by an incredible player in Tucker DeVries, but that Iowa State defense is going to be the best defense they played all season, or at least in the conference season, of course. Going back to who obviously they didn't have an incredible non-con, but obviously you look at Illinois, who they would obviously potentially play later on as well. That BYU-Illinois game would be incredible as well. But I think Drake, they got a draw this year that they really like. I know Washington State's been incredibly coached, but people talked about last year the whole Miami draw, and they held Miami down to it was a 9-point game, I think was the final result, or just right at 10. So look, I think Drake got a really good draw, and I think any game they're going to play on the way, I'm not saying it's going to be easy because Washington State's really, really good, and then Iowa State we know is an incredible defensive team. We saw what they did to Houston, and then obviously they'd have to play the winner of either BYU, Illinois, somewhere in that region to get down into the Sweet 16. So I think Drake has a Sweet 16 potential, and I think that would be the most exciting any game they play in the bottom half.
Yeah, Drake obviously coming out of the Missouri Valley, kind of stealing, if we want to talk about, stealing as early as conference tournaments, they took down Indiana State in that Missouri Valley tournament to clinch that auto bid. Another really interesting matchup. Riley, like we said, these Duquesne Dukes, they're going up against BYU as the 11th seed. Again, like you said, not a team that anybody really thought to come out of the Atlantic 10 this year. In conference play, they lost their first 5 games. And then they finished out the season, including the Atlantic 10 tournament, on an 8-game win streak. They are hot right now. Any way you feel like, the Duke's deep guard play can overcome BYU.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really interesting matchup because it's 2 teams with a ton of depth. I mean, on the BYU side, you have 6, 7 guys, maybe even 8, who can, pour in double digits on any given night, depending on who's been healthy. And I think that matches up interestingly against the Duquesne side that has a ton of depth. I mean, we saw it here in the A10 tournament. If it wasn't Day Grant or Jimmy Clark going off, it was them getting contributions up and down the board from guys. And the defensive effort all throughout the conference tournament over the last week has just been so impressive from Duquesne. And when you have a defense like that, obviously generates a ton of offense, and I think that can keep you in any game. I mean, we saw it, Sam, you and I, from Jimmy Clark and Day Grant this week, just how impactful they can be. And I think whenever you have guards like that who know how to get it done, especially when you're coming into a tournament hot like this, like you just mentioned, 8 straight wins for Duquesne, there's always a chance that they can cause a massive upset, especially if, their depth is able to overwhelm BYU. Like maybe we saw the depth in the defense overwhelm a couple teams during the A10 conference tournament over the past week.
Yeah, absolutely. Day Grant leading the Dukes with 16.9 points per game. Then you got Jimmy Clark on that team, who just was announced today as the most outstanding player of the Atlantic 10 tournament. So some really great talent on that roster. Peyton, you're a guy that watches, teams from all over the country, though. Are there are there 1 or 2 players that you feel like could make a huge difference for their teams in this region?
2 words for you. Boo Buie from Northwestern. If they beat 8 seed Florida Atlantic, you can't tell me that nobody would love to see them upset UConn in that second round matchup. Not saying it's going to happen, but would not shock me if Boo Buie doesn't go on a Marquise Noel, Kimball Walker type of run in March, because that's what stuff happens. Forget all these stats, and I'm a stat nerd. I love them all. But when we get to the NCAA tournament, none of that stuff matters. I've been guilty of it before when filling out my bracket, caring too much about stats. None of it matters when we get to this time of the year. Anything can happen. Northwestern, they shoot over 39% from 3, and they got Boo Buie. I'm rooting for some Wildcats, the right Wildcats, not the one down there 75 miles down from Louisville. So go Boo Buie. That's who I'm rooting for.
I love that. Channeling Kemba Walker to potentially take down UConn would be very interesting. So I think that's going to wrap it up for the East region. Let's take a look at where our number 2 overall seed, the Houston Cougars, are in the South. Obviously, Houston, they're the number 1 seed, but they did not win their conference tournament. They were taken down by Iowa State in the Big 12 in stunning fashion. But going down the rest of the roster, I mean, we've got Marquette taking down Western Kentucky, Kentucky taking down 14 seed Oakland, and Duke taking on 13 seed Vermont. The Vermont Catamounts obviously clinching another America East title. They are one of the most dominant teams in mid-major basketball. Josh, you have had a lot of thoughts about Kentucky basketball this season on our blog. Make sure you go check out some of his past pieces on house-enterprise.com. But now that we're here and everybody's back to 0-0, what do you like about this Kentucky team, and where could they, possibly come up short against Oakland?
Well, I mean, you start with the offense, right? And with the offense, what do you need to win in March? Every team that makes the Final Four and wins a national title are carried by elite guards. And there may not be a better set of guards in the country than Kentucky. I'm just speaking facts here. And so when they're playing good, you're talking about 2 potential top 5 picks in Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham coming off your bench. DJ Wagner's been playing better the last 3 or 4 weeks of the year. Justin Edwards' development into a pure scorer now. Kentucky's guards are elite, and that's why if they do make a run and get out of this region, it'll be behind their guard play. The thing that scares everybody is the up and down play of the defense. We've seen them play high level, really almost elite defense, actually, in wins at Auburn, wins against Alabama, wins at Tennessee, wins at Mississippi State. So the defense is there and the potential to play, but it's so up and down roller coaster ride that you don't know which brand of Kentucky you're going to get. If they lock in defensively, the offense is always going to be there. And we've said for this pretty much this whole year that they don't need to be elite for 40 minutes. The way the offense scores the basketball, they need to be elite for 5-6 minute stretches because the way they score, teams can't keep up with them. So this Oakland game can go one of 2 ways. They can come out motivated, locked in from the go, and they blow Oakland away. Trey Townsend will give them some issues on the interior, but they could blow Oakland away by 30 points. Or they could fall asleep, get back cut to death. Oakland slows the tempo, hits some shots, and now all of a sudden it's a 2 or 3 point game with under 2 minutes to go. I expect you see the best version of Kentucky in round 1. Where I see pitfalls that really scares me as a Wildcat fan. If Texas Tech goes ahead and beats North Carolina State, experienced team, older team coming out of the best conference in college basketball, they've got stars and Pop Isaacs. They will grind you out. That's a potential upset in round 2. But if they could get to the Sweet 16, I actually like their matchup better against a Marquette or Florida than I do against a Texas Tech because Marquette, Florida wants to run with them and play their style. And we found out Alabama tried it. You can't outrun Kentucky when they want to run. So I think the draw is good, to be completely honest, but it's so up and down. We'll see what Wildcat team we get. They either make the Final Four of this bracket or they get beat in the second round by a Texas Tech.
Yeah, I have to admit, I have seen some pretty crazy upsets in my, years watching the NCAA tournament. I have to say, I feel like Kentucky has been on a lot of the worst ends of those than others. But I think that's just a testament to how good they are, right? Yeah, exactly. St. Peter's Peacocks, obviously being the most prominent example. I think they'll be okay against Oakland, but we'll see how they fare. Shout out to anybody that's making comments on our live stream.
I was going to say, DeRosa, do you have a comment on that? Did you see what you just said?
Hey, the people love me. That's all I can say. Love me or hate me, you gotta love me.
And we got a comment from a Facebook user here. Boys, some major upset possible. Love this damn time of year. Like Purdue's route, but I see multiple 3, 4, 5 seed that are primed for upset. Let's get into them. I also agree. We'll probably get into Purdue's route a little bit later, but 1 4 seed that I feel like, I don't know if they're primed for an upset, but this is a team that I've liked to watch throughout this year. Riley, I know you're a mid-major guy. This is one of the top mid-major programs in the country. Anything you can tell us about this Vermont Catamounts team? Oh, you're on mute.
So, like you said, Sam, one of the top mid-major programs over the past couple of years. Head coach John Becker has done an excellent job with Vermont. I mean, they run the American East. I'm not sure how many consecutive bids it is at this point, but, they're consistently making the NCAA tournament over the past couple of years. And, I think they're a team with a ton of depth. They have, again, similar to like I mentioned with BYU, they have maybe 5, almost 6 guys who can pour in double digits on any given night if needed. And I think against a Duke team that's been a little shaky over the past couple of months, throughout the season, bowing out early in conference championship, couple important losses throughout the season. I know they weren't necessarily upset by any mid-majors throughout their non-conference schedule or anything like that. But I think this is a Vermont team that always can put a big team on upset watch. Like I said, they have a lot of depth. You look at guys like TJ Long, who they bought in this year from the transfer portal. He's excellent, a bit of an oversized guard who creates a lot of mismatches. You got senior Aaron Delaney, who's been fantastic, another guard for them, and Shamir Bogues as well, another oversized guard who creates a good amount of mismatches, especially in a conference like the American East. And while obviously Duke is a huge program and they have a ton to play for here in March, I think Vermont is a team that could potentially put them on upset watch, here in the South region, especially with, like I said, just how shaky Duke has been kind of up and down throughout the year.
Yeah, Sam, if I can comment on that too with Vermont's resume, I mean, you go through, they haven't lost a game since February 8th, right? And that was against an NJIT team that's pretty pesky, right? The NJIT didn't get too far in the American East playoffs with, all things considered, but they had a lot of change this year, right? Grant Bill Meyer was sort of the new head coach. He was brought in there and had to rebuild the team. But I look at Vermont and they cruise through a lot of different challenges in the American East, right? They came from behind and won. They held big leads and won, right? They won a lot of different games. And to me, this Vermont team is, I'm not sold on picking them to beat Duke at this point, but they're a team that on Friday or Saturday afternoon, could we be saying, oh, Vermont beat Duke? Are we surprised? It's not necessarily a take I'd be surprised with, right? They've got a lot of good shooters. They've got a lot of good guys that can play inside. And with Duke, who's sort of been this up and down to Riley's point just now, that's a really intriguing matchup that I've got to sit with here.
Yeah, Vermont, this is their third consecutive appearance in the tournament and their fifth conference tournament title in the last 6 years.
And I will say, too, the only team that disrupted that streak was Hartford, who's now in the Division III circuit, too. So a freak sort of upset in the America East. They went on and for those that recall, almost beat Baylor in the 2021 COVID year. Crazy stuff, right? Yeah, that was the only year that Vermont ever faltered there.
R.I.P. Hartford. What a name drop. I forgot they dropped the D3. Hey, real quick, Sam, there's a matchup potentially looming in the second round I want to touch on real quick, and everybody can comment on it. If Texas A&M, they obviously played really well during the SEC tournament, obviously, gave up a lead to Florida. Let's say they get by Nebraska and play Houston, as long as Houston doesn't drop it to Longwood, right? That's a matchup that's really interesting to me because Texas A&M has really great guard play. Boogs Radford and Wade Taylor, and especially in the SEC tournament this last weekend in Nashville, went nuts in all their games they played. They've got momentum. They can match Houston's toughness. That's kind of a game stuck in the mud in which they like, and if they can keep it close inside that final 4 or 5 minutes, the guard play, once again, Wade Taylor is capable of going on 20-point runs by himself. Same way with Boogs Radford, but he's more downhill. If we get that second round game between Houston and Texas A&M, especially with Houston kind of hobbled a little bit right now, that's a potential upset looming. I like A&M to give Houston fits, even if they don't beat them.
I think that's a fantastic point. Real potential to be a 1 seed that takes an early exit. The next team I kind of wanted to talk about here, I know, Trevor, you were very happy about it. Speaking of a team that already took down Duke earlier this week in tournament week, the NC State Wolfpack, clinching their first ACC title since the late 1980s, going up against 6-seed Texas Tech in the first round. What do you like out of your Wolfpack this year?
Look, there might be 3 people in this country that felt better about Graham McCaslin than me, and I'm not gonna lie, whenever I saw that draw, I was like, give me a break. I knew we were gonna get the 11, just to be front, but it cannot be understated that this team is the hottest team in the country right now. 5 games, 5 nights, beats the 3 top seeds in the ACC that, albeit if we're going to call it weak, whatever, that's fine. Beat the top 3 seeds in the conference. All 3 of those teams are in March Madness, albeit Virginia might be the one we all can agree is probably not supposed to be. Regardless, hottest team in the country. Obviously, I had a hell of a night last night, but to think that this team can't do it, I'm looking forward, and I probably shouldn't be, but I'm looking forward. Obviously, Oakland, I've got a case for Oakland that I'm sure I'll get into it with Josh and Peyton and Michael DeRosa tomorrow on ECV's show. But, there's a time and place for everything. look, if they can take care of Texas Tech, there's not a better team in this side of the bracket that can give Kentucky a problem. And I know as soon as we drew that, Josh and I have chose not to text each other about it because it hasn't happened yet. But just keeping it to that, look, this is the hottest team in the country right now. I'm elated. The fact that they're even in here, I don't want to be a fan for too much. But at the end of the day, it's what it's all about. March Madness is incredible. And, Wolfpack, baby. I don't know what to tell you.
I want to get into this number 2 versus 15 matchup here. Marquette taking on Western Kentucky. Peyton, any thoughts on this Western Kentucky team and how they could, give a game against the Golden Eagles?
It would be curious to see if Tyler Kolek, how healthy he is, because we go back to last year, they ended up getting out in the second round by Michigan State, and Tyler Kolek had a hand injury coming into that game, and they ended up losing. I don't think this is the matchup that I specifically want to talk to, because Western Kentucky, they've got Brandon Newman, they've got a couple good guards on their roster, so they'll maybe be able to come up with the upset. The one upset I think is going to happen, and Josh is going to be with me on this one, is I think Florida, if they get by Colorado or Boise State, whoever wins that playing game, I think Marquette goes out into the second round for a second year straight, because Florida plays a fun style of basketball. They've been really hot. Obviously, they got beat up by Auburn today in the SEC championship game. But I really like this Florida roster, and I think they've got the pieces, and especially if Kolek is not 100% healthy, I think Florida beats Marquette in the second round. That's what I think it happens.
I agree with that, and you read my mind, actually. I love Florida's guards. They make shots. They play up and down, so tempo in this game potentially between Florida and Marquette would be high-flying. But the difference maker is Florida is an elite offensive rebounding team. Absolutely elite offensive rebounding team. Tyrese Samuel coming over from Seton Hall has done way better at Florida in his 1 year. I think he did in his couple years at Seton Hall. He will be in the starting lineup. Unfortunate injury today to Micah Hanlongton. But Florida is offensive rebounding. They're tough, and they've got elite shot makers. I'm agreeing with that. I think Florida could move on to the Sweet 16 in that upset.
I think when we look at this just mini region, if we get Marquette, Western Kentucky plays at the fastest pace in the country. This game, they're going to score a ton of points. And then Florida, if they play, let's say Marquette wins that game, let's say Florida wins, that game will be played in the hundreds as well. So this is just going to be offense on offense on offense. It's going to be so much fun and elite guard play from both teams. Tyler Kolek, Cam Jones versus Walter Clayton, Zion Pullen, Will Richard, Riley Kugel. Dude, if you want guard play, and I'll tell you right now in the tournament, you want guard play, that's going to be a fun game.
Hey, there's 4 30-win teams in college basketball this year, and 2 of them are in this bracket, and we haven't talked about one of them yet. I just want to be really quick I've been on the Sun Belt's case about the App State thing, and like 30-win. I know JMU was everybody's pretty pick the whole year, especially after to open the season against Michigan State, which, I mean, that aged like beautiful, beautiful, fine red wine, that win. Obviously, it didn't look like it at first. But JMU, I'm not – Wisconsin obviously did not in the season great, but I just want to make the clear case that JMU has the offense to keep up with anybody. And if there's any team in this section that they could beat right now, it's probably Wisconsin, right? If they drew, say the 6 Texas Tech, maybe the Texas Tech defense I feel really good about. I think James Madison, and to Jake's point earlier, Vermont being, I'm not sitting here saying it couldn't happen against Duke, but I think if Duke can take care of Vermont, they should be really worried about James Madison in that round of 32. And I think they have a really, easy path, not necessarily easy, but really good shot of making the Sweet 16. That's a team I'm going to be, circling for the next 24 hours and making that decision.
Hey, shout out Michael Green, who was a Bryant guy before. Now James Madison has started half the games they've got. And looking at James Madison's rundown here, I mean they've got 6 guys in double figures right now. 6 guys, not 5. Right? It's very rare to have guys that are even in high major conferences, 5 guys in double figures at this point. I mean, James Madison has cruised through this conference. I think they were the number 2 seed in the Sun Belt at this point. That's a matchup that no matter who comes out of that 4-13 matchup, to your point, Trevor, I mean, let's say James Madison's there at that point. Like, let's say they pull off the upset of Wisconsin here, even though they won the Big Ten. They had a couple good games in the Big Ten. A couple good wins. Right, James Madison looks to be in a prime position to, if they were in the Sweet 16, would any of us sit here and say like, "Wow, we're shocked that James Madison's in the Sweet 16"?
Nope.
I can't say so, right?
I'm no body language expert, but when I was watching the selection show and they cut to Wisconsin, and they cut to Wisconsin and they were happy, right? They're like, "Yeah, we're in. We got the 5 seed." They showed James Madison. The applause and the celebrations kind of felt a little bit subdued. I could be reading into it a little bit too far, but I think it was something to note, and I think it just really shows the quality of this James Madison team. Jake, any thoughts on a player to watch that could come out of this region and really make a case for both himself and his team?
Oh man, that's a really tough one. I look at. I mean, I'm going to be more biased off the paper to a guy like TJ Bickerstaff, right? Like of James Madison. That I want to see how much problem he gives Wisconsin right off the bat, right? I mean, this is a guy that's got 18 plus points per game on the year, right? He's played every minute of every game pretty much for James Madison. He's been a lock in the Sun Belt. He's coming in off a little bit of a low streak right now, right? Like, I mean, he's been consistently in the high teens and low 20s all year. And right now, he's got 16 points over the last 2 games, right? So, it's more of a reflection on how much Wisconsin comes out and, is AJ Storr firing on all cylinders, right? Like, are they going to come out and demolish James Madison or whatever it might be, right? But I'm looking at that 5-12 as the matchup for a guy to come out and score, 30, 40 points, something like that, right? Something to sort of shock the world, right? That's a matchup I'm looking at this, but curious to see what the rest of the field's got.
I've got a couple. I love this region for individual play, and again, it revolves around the guards. You look at Nebraska, Tominaga. I mean, he's shown he can go for 40. I mentioned Wade Taylor from Texas A&M, Rob Dillingham. You're talking about a guy that's already been electric this year that could carry Kentucky forward. Rob Dillingham could put on a show in this NCAA tournament. And then Walter Clayton Jr. from Florida, kind of the same way. And then we talk about Western Kentucky, Don McHenry shooting like 38, 39% from 3, their best scorer on that team. If they were to upset Marquette in that first round, Don McHenry, could go for like a 30, 35 piece and put his name out there in March Madness lore. So I love this bracket for like individual stud guard play that could give us some special performances.
Yeah, this is going to be a fantastic region. A lot of star power, a lot of upset potential. That's going to wrap it up for the South. We're halfway through our bracket, guys. We're doing a great job. And I'd also like to give a big thank you to the 633 active viewers that we have right now. We're streaming across a bunch of different platforms. We're up to 634 now. That's awesome. We're streaming on a bunch of different platforms. We thank you guys so much for watching this House of College Hoops 2024 tournament preview special. And we hope that we can help you guys with some of your picks. But overall, we're just, beyond ecstatic that you're here. While we, before we get into the final 2 regions, Jake, I think you have a word from our sponsor of today's podcast, our friends over at the Rithmm app.
We do. Yeah, we're super excited to be partnering up with Rithmm. And as the folks that are following along from a visual perspective can see here, you guys already know that March is filled with unpredictability, thrilling upsets. I mean, my favorite upsets have been, totally like edge of my seat kind of deal as recently as last year. Madness all around. But what if AI could help you craft an awesome bracket and you could win some bets? Rithmm is the app that can help you do that. The AI sports betting app for player props, game picks, everything else, right? Rithmm stands at the forefront of innovation, offering sports enthusiasts a cutting-edge tool to elevate their March Madness experience. The app leverages data sets, historical trends, player statistics, and much more to help create the perfect bracket and picks specifically for you, right? If you value a certain stat over another, you can say, hey, Rithmm, I want to make a model that values this more than, the other statistic, right? Total personalization involved combined with the best data scientist in the business for AI sports wagering. If you head to the link in our bio and on houseenterprise.com, you can sign up for free to build your perfect bracket and help you conquer March. So head on over to Rithmm, that's RITHMM, to create your account, generate your free AI March Madness bracket, and win big. As a disclaimer, House Enterprise and Rithmm are not responsible for any losses or lost wages on picks that you make. Please gamble responsibly. Find help if you need it. Call 1-800-GAMBLER for anything that you might need. Download the Rithmm app. Use the code in our bio, or the link in our bio, I should say. Download Rithmm. Be a more informed sports gambler or wagerer and make your picks on March Madness this year. Super excited to be partnered with Rithmm as we get into this stretch of March Madness. Again, you can go to their March Madness bracket generator and help you make your picks this year. Exciting stuff. Download Rithmm now.
Yeah, really exciting stuff. The future of sports analysis is here. And as always, make sure you're wagering responsibly. So let's get into our third region, the Midwest. This is a really, really fun region as well. I mean, I'm saying this for all of them, but how could I not, right? Obviously, top 4 seeds. We got Purdue, Tennessee, Creighton, and Kansas. One matchup that I thought was really fun, one team that I think is really fun in this is 14 seed Akron coming out of the MAC after a really crazy MAC championship game against Kent State. Kent State, got the bucket to go up 60-59, and then they foul kind of errantly in the final seconds, giving Akron time to shoot 2 free throws and clinch the 1-point lead. I don't know if any of you guys saw that game, but any thoughts on this year's Zips?
Yeah, I wrote about them. Sorry, Michael, go ahead if you want.
I was just going to say it's a tough draw against Creighton. You can take more serious analysis, Josh.
Well, I wrote about the MAC in the ECB preseason magazine, and I had Akron actually finish in second to Kent State, who ironically they beat for the conference championship last night. Akron's a solid team. Enrique Freeman, Ali, Greg Tribble. I think they could hang around with Creighton for a majority of this game, actually, because as we know, Creighton's not the deepest team. Once you have to start getting into that bench a little bit, Creighton kind of falls off. But they do have Baylor Shireman. They have great guard play. So I think Creighton wins this game. But do not be shocked if Akron, within the final 4, 5, 6 minutes of this game, if it's not within a 1 or 2 possessions, either way, because again, Ali, Enrique Freeman, that 2-headed monster for Akron. I think that they can give Creighton some issues, but they're going to have to get them in foul trouble and go into that Creighton bench a little bit. And then it'll favor them a little bit more. But I think this is a closer one than maybe the spread will show, or maybe kind of commoners would have you lead to believe. I think Akron can keep it close, though.
Yeah. Riley, any thoughts on how Akron can keep this one close against Creighton?
Yeah, listen, I mean, I know I'm here as the mid-major analyst. I don't want to sound like too much of a homer, and I certainly have not seen a lot of Creighton this year, but this Akron team has 2 guys who we just mentioned, in Enrique Freeman and Ali, who just dominated their conference all year long. Enrique Freeman, Conference Player of the Year, Ali, a first-team all-conference selection, and I think that physicality could potentially give this Creighton team some issues. I mean, obviously coming out of a much bigger conference, and they've certainly dealt with tougher opposition throughout the year. But like I just mentioned, those guys, Enrique Freeman and Ali can keep this team in any game against any opponent they're going to come up against.
Absolutely. So maybe some upset potential from the Zips here. But I think, the common upset matchup that, we like to talk about when making our brackets is the 12-5. And this 12-5 matchup is very interesting. Peyton, I know it seems like you're liking this matchup, so I would love to hear your thoughts on this as Gonzaga takes on McNeese.
Yeah, once this matchup got announced, I told Josh, who was sitting right next to me, that's easy money for me because it didn't matter who McNeese State played in the 12-5 or 13-4, whatever the seed line was going to be for them. I was 90% sure I was going to pick McNeese to upset a team in March. And Gonzaga is probably the perfect team because they don't play any defense. They don't have the greatest of guard play. They really struggled early on in the season, started to pick it up late half of the season. I really like this McNeese State squad. Will Wade, in his first year, he took a program who last season won 11 games. First time since 2000 2002 that they're going dancing their back into this tournament. They won 30 games this year, which is incredible. Shahada Wells. That's the only dude you need to know from this roster. He is incredible. He had over 27 points, I think, in their championship game in the Southland Conference. Incredible player, incredible performance. And they got a guy in Christian Shoemate who can just dunk on anybody in the country. Gonzaga don't guard. They're not going to guard in this game. I really like this 12-over-5 matchup. I think Mini State beats them.
Anybody have any thoughts on this? That was great, by the way, Peyton. A fantastic analysis. Anybody have any thoughts, though, on this 8-9 matchup, Utah State versus TCU?
Yeah, look, I'll just be really quick as the honorary Mountain West person. Like I said, I led the show with that, for crying out loud. I will say I'm a little surprised by the seeding. I mentioned it at the top. I knew we would get to it, and I'm not a bracketologist. Big asterisks. I've made that very clear all year. Not going to change that now. But Utah State, for being impressive as they've been, I know they've had some blips early on in the year. Look, they won the Mountain West, for crying out loud. I mean, they're an incredible team. Mountain West regular season, to be clear. And I know TCU has some really dynamic guard play and really fast there. I'm still going to, I don't want to get too much into picks today. I'm still picking the Aggies because I think Danny Sprinkle's that kind of coach to have 0.01% of scoring and roster return. Let me make sure that number's clear. 0.01% of roster return, and to come around and get the production he's had out of players like Darius Brown and Gray Ospor, this is an incredible team that I think is honestly ridiculously underseeded. I can't sit here and tell you how Gonzaga is a 5 seed. I'm not saying Utah State should be, but the fact that there's a 3 seed disparity difference there, I think is absolutely ridiculous. And I think Utah State ended up being the kind of the team that fell on the sword for this one. I think Texas maybe a little bit. I know the Big 12 fighting against each other. It's constantly a boxing match in the Big 12 as the best basketball conference. I think South Carolina earned their spot. So I'm not sitting here telling you there's a case for any of these teams. I just may shuffle them a little bit. And the fact that Utah State's at 8 is ridiculous. And be on the lookout. I think that gives Purdue some upset scare in round of 32.
Yeah, and speaking of Purdue, before we get into Purdue, actually, I just want to say that our stream has just surpassed 700 viewers on all our platforms. So once again, thank you so much for coming on. We love that you guys love to hear us talk college hoops. Purdue. I don't want to be too mean to Purdue, but obviously we have to talk about it. Them, being the second team in history to lose to a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament last year to Fairleigh Dickinson. I think they kind of got a little bit of an easier break. I mean, they're a 1 seed. It's not like, that's going to happen twice for them. But they're taking on the winner of Grambling State versus Montana State. Grambling State obviously clinching their very first Division I NCAA tournament appearance. Anybody got any thoughts on this year's Boilermakers? Yeah, let's give a quick round of applause for Grambling State. Congratulations to the Tigers there. Love that, guys. Any thoughts on Purdue's path this year?
Yeah, I said it just a little bit ago when we were talking about the bracket of death. Purdue's got a pretty favorable draw. Now, maybe if TCU gets by Utah State, the way TCU can speed them up and really get into their guards, that was their problem all last year. A couple of their losses this year, they kind of reverted back. But Braden Smith has been tremendous. Fletcher Lawyer still up and down, but a better year from freshman to sophomore. TCU could give them some issue, just speeding the tempo, getting up, and maybe making Purdue turnover prone. But I mean, I see Purdue cruising to at least the Elite Eight. Even if Kansas is fully healthy, or at least that's what they say, I think Purdue will get Kansas again. And then that would leave the pitfalls I would see for Purdue to not make their first Final Four since 1980 would be that team down there at the bottom in the number 2 seed, Tennessee. I know they played in Maui. I know it was a good game, and Purdue pulled away in a foul fest. But Tennessee's much better. They are much better than what they were in late November. And you would talk about the 2 best players in the country dueling it out. I mean, obviously different positions, but Zach Edey on one end and you have Dalton Connect on another. And what if I keep saying this whole stream? Guard play wins you games in March. Dalton Connect with the ball in his hands and a chance to go for a 40-piece on you. I think Purdue should be very nervous about a potential Elite Eight game against Tennessee. Outside of that, though, I think they cruise to a Final Four.
Yeah, just to offer some commentary there, Josh, on the on last year's bracket, actually, right? Purdue was the 1 seed, obviously, last year. I if someone corrects me, that's fine. But I think they were one overall last year, right? Were they one overall, or was somebody else?
I thought they were.
I know they were.
Right here.
Oh,
They
Alabama.
were once. They were the ones. Alabama was.
Alabama,
Gotcha.
Alabama
Yeah,
was,
good call,
yes.
Josh. That's right.
So Purdue was the one in the East last year, and obviously what happened with FDU was they would think a fluke. FDU thinks it's they picked them off, right? You look at the rest of the bracket, like the 8-9 was Memphis and FAU. The consensus I feel like was pretty split last year, right? Of who wins that game, but a lot of people, in my own opinion, nobody else's had one of those two picking off Purdue, right? If it wasn't Memphis or FAU, you had Duke at number 5 beating Oral Roberts. You had Tennessee number 4 against Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, right? 58-55. That was a very competitive that part of the bracket. Let's go on, right? You had Kentucky at 6 who beat Providence. You had Kansas State 3, who you saw what they did. They got to the final of the East Regional. You had Michigan State. You had Marquette. I mean, that was a very daunting bracket for Purdue. I look at this and see their potential path as, okay, either Utah State or TCU. Fine, they should beat them, right? Gonzaga, they should blow through them too, right? Kansas, I think that's probably the most competitive game at this point. That's a team that Purdue should beat, given Kansas's, sort of up and down stature this year, right? You look at the bottom half of the bracket. This is a year that I think my overall point here is I look at this as a much more favorable draw, to your point, Josh, for Purdue as I did last year, right? Purdue was going to run into a lot of challenges last year had they got out of the first round, where as I see, a little bit, maybe I look at Tennessee in the bottom half of the bracket. I look at maybe Kansas as a threat here for Purdue. I think they're just coasting a little bit more than they were last year. And I think maybe, I don't know, was it a mental thing? Was it a physical thing? Was it, a basketball thing for Purdue last year? Who knows, right? But this looks more of a direct path for Purdue than it was last year in 2023.
And Josh, I'm glad you brought up that matchup between Purdue and Tennessee early in their year, because one, I totally forgot about that, and that was a fantastic game. And two, that was really interesting in the way that Tennessee, in a lot of moments, I mean, they obviously didn't come up with the win there, but in a lot of moments, they really limited Zach Edey, except at the line. It really felt like they were really hacking him the entire game. He ended up shooting 9 for 17. So he, got to the free throw line a lot, missed 8 shots. Really interesting stuff. Would definitely set the seed for a very interesting rematch. Any final thoughts on this region before we move into our last one of the night? No? All right.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, Sam. I was trying to get in there. If you're looking for a higher seed to get red hot and make like a Sweet 16 or maybe even beyond that, I know it sounds crazy, but if you've watched Oregon the last couple nights, South Carolina will slow the game down to be physical. They get by South Carolina. I think they could do the opposite to a potential Creighton in the second round. Oregon at the 11 is a very interesting pick to make a little run in this tournament.
Yeah, that is a really great point. I guess what would you call Oregon, right? The final Pac-12 champs, the perennial Pac-12 champs, because they won this last tournament. But it will definitely make for an interesting run.
I call it heartbreaking.
Yeah,
that's what I call it.
Heartbreaking Pac-12 champions. Really sad stuff. But let's not get too sentimental yet here, right? We're gonna get into our last region, but before we do, I just want to say again, I'd like to thank. Oh, we got somebody joining from Road to the Garden, Chris Bedinga.
Hello.
Chris, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. Thanks everybody for starting this up. I hope everyone's doing well, and I hope all the Big East rage has already been shared at the top of the show here.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit of Big East rage, and before we move out of the Midwest region, do you have any thoughts on the top Big East seed in this region, the Creighton Blue Jays?
Oh man, I love the draw, right? Akron is solid. Ali and Enrique Freeman provide a pretty good 1-2 punch. But if you get past that, I love the draw against both South Carolina or Oregon and former Creighton coach Dana Altman. Tennessee's scary. Purdue, not so much. I think Ryan Kalkbrenner would match up fairly decently against Edey. This is a situation for Creighton where it's like, you got the draw, you could ever want. So it's up to them whether they seize the moment, I guess.
Absolutely. And we got a comment from a Facebook user here. Who you got winning it all? I don't want to answer that question yet. We've got some predictions coming up towards the end of the show. And in terms of game-to-game picks, make sure you check out our stream tomorrow where the ECB guys here, Josh and Trevor, break down the entire bracket in excruciating detail. But before we get to that show, we're going to get Peyton as well, of course. And before we get into that, let's get into our final region of the night. And again, if you guys have any more questions, throw it into our comments. We've got some more. We'll answer those at the end for you. Let's get into our final region, the West. Obviously, here we've got the top seed North Carolina Tar Heels and our remaining top 4 seeds, Arizona, Baylor, and Alabama. A really interesting bracket here. Any initial thoughts on these top 4 seeds?
If there was ever a bracket out of the 4 that a FAU, a San Diego State, a Miami, a ridiculous high seed or low seed, whatever, I've 26 years I've gotten that wrong. It's this one. I kept sitting here, and I know we were going to get to our final 4 picks after this bracket is over, but I kept sitting here and reminding myself over and over again that all the other ones I see a clear path for a 1, a 2, a 3, even a 4. And this one, honestly, it just going through it, I think there's a case that 1, 5, 4, 6, 11, 3, 7, and 2 can all make the Sweet 16, Elite 8, and Final 4. I think it's crazy. This is the most ridiculous bracket. I wouldn't necessarily call it the bracket of death just because of the parity across it. I think we kind of alluded to that in the top. I agreed with Josh earlier when we talked about it. East and South, I think, are going to be a bloodbath. I think that's going to be the most physically exhausted team out of those two. I think those are going to be the more bracket of death style. But this is going to be the one where this is offense, consistent offense throughout this entire team. And there's a few in there. I know Mississippi State throws it off a little bit, but this is going to be where the average winner is going to be the highest out of all of these in terms of the points scored. And so that's just my first reaction when I saw this, and I thought it was really fitting and fun that it was last.
Yeah, Peyton,
What
you got
if
something?
Oh, sorry.
Hold on. Wait your turn. It's my turn. One thing I want to mention, as far as like these top 4 seeds of the top quadrant of this region, I don't know how Michigan State got in, especially as a 9 seed, but Mr.
Amen.
March is in the NCAA tournament. And if you're North Carolina, that's the wrong person you want to see in your round of 32 game. Michigan State, they've got good guards. They got Tyson Walker, got Adrian Holgard, and they got Tom Izzo on the sideline coaching for him, who gets the most out of his players during this time of the year. I still think North Carolina will win that game, but man, if you are a North Carolina fan, you are probably nervous as hell heading into that round of 32 matchup if you see Tom Izzo on the other side of the floor.
That's a really great point, Peyton. I have also been kind of keeping, light attention on Michigan State all year. Obviously, for those of you who read House of College Hoops regularly, I'm kind of the guy that mans our top 25 poll. And every week I look at all the rankings, right? I look at the Ken Palm, I look at the net, I look at just general standings throughout the country. And Michigan State has always kind of been up there. The analytics really, really like this Spartans team, but they have not really found a way to crack into the top 25 for most of this year. So they could be a really, really interesting team in this tournament. DeRosa, you had something as well?
Yeah, there are 2 matchups I really am looking at that I think are very interesting. It's been a while since I spoke, so I've been saving it for these 2.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's look at the 11-6 right here. New Mexico, Clemson. New Mexico is the betting favorite, and not only that, they should be the betting favorite. New Mexico's going to absolutely smoke this Clemson team. When you look at the guards in these 2 games, Chase Hunter is very good. Joe Girard, very good. Those 2 guys cannot defend. I have Jalen House. I have Donovan Dett. I have Jamal Mashburn. I have 3 best guards on the floor, honestly. I think they do. And then inside, they have multiple matchups for PJ Hall. You can put an Eli Jr. Joseph on him. You can put a Mustafa Amsil on him. You can put the freshman whose name I can't think of on him. And they're just going to create problems there. That, I got New Mexico. I bet New Mexico pretty heavy already. And then I look at the 314. I think people are going to look at Colgate. You should not be looking at Colgate. Baylor's going to absolutely smoke them. People look at Colgate every year. Baylor's going to play fast. Baylor's just going to run them. Jacoby Walter, Yves Massey, when Colgate's trying to do that cutting stuff inside, no. It's Baylor. You get Baylor, New Mexico round 2. That game is going to be incredibly fun. Excellent guards, fun bigs inside. Man, yeah. But Baylor and New Mexico are two of my strongest picks against spread. Bet those two heavy.
Yeah. The Lobos, Mustafa Amzil, a former Dayton Flyer. Riley, any thoughts on this Dayton team? They were a team that, they lost in this year's Atlantic 10 semifinals to the eventual champions, Duquesne Dukes. Deron Holmes had a really excellent game at a 20-plus point performance, but against Duquesne, the Dukes really just limited every other effective. And trust me, Dayton's got a lot of effective scorers on that team. They limited everybody except for Deron Holmes. Anything that you feel like Dayton could clean up against Nevada that would get them the win?
Yeah, well, first of all, you just worry that maybe the blueprint's out now on how to beat them, especially after they were so strong in the non-conference. You talk about wins over LSU, over St. John's as well, I believe. I think they picked up one over Cincinnati as well. And obviously the resume there was pretty big. I think it gave them a lot of notoriety coming into the conference championship. And certainly people had them picked as the favorite. They were, pretty much ranked within the AP top 25 throughout the whole year. But on top of that, they come into the A10 conference play. It's a little shaky. Losses to Richmond, losses to VCU, losses to George Mason. They didn't finish out the season super strong, and they get down to the A10 championship in Brooklyn, and they kind of floundered against, a Duquesne team that went on to win it. But still in that matchup, really, Deron Holmes, the only one contributing much, on Dayton's side, other than Nate Santos, who I believe had 10 points and was particularly effective in the first half. So in terms of what do they need to clean up, I think the defense needs to be cleaned up a lot. But on top of that, it's critical that this Dayton team is going to be able to get contributions across the floor. I know you just mentioned, Sam, they have a lot of guys who can score it, but late into conference play, we haven't necessarily been seeing, the numbers up and down the stat sheet for Dayton outside of a guy like Deron Holmes. And if they're going to compete, with a team like Nevada, I know who's a lower seed, but a very talented Nevada team that has guys like Gerard Lucas, Keenan Blackshear, Nick Davis as well has been fantastic in critical moments for Nevada this year. So in terms of what they need to clean up, Deron Holmes needs to keep doing his thing, but the guys like Nate Santos, Kobe Brea, Enoch Cheeks coming off the bench as well, I think they need to be able to contribute effectively, or else they're going to have a tough time with Nevada.
Yeah.
Really
and just correct myself here. I said that Dayton fell to Duquesne in the semifinals. It was actually in the quarterfinals.
Really quick, Riley. You've obviously talked about the mid-major part of this. I got to see Dayton early on in the year at Charleston, and look, Malachi's absence is going to be unreal for this. I mean, obviously, talk about. I know you alluded to it a little bit there, but talk about how important he would be to a run where they would have to play against Arizona in the round of 32 potentially, or Baylor or New Mexico in the Sweet 16. Talk about how big of a loss that is for Dayton.
Dayton, outside of Deron Holmes, who has carried this team throughout the year, guard play has kind of become a big thing. You see guys like Kobe Elvis, who was one of the A10's best three-point shooters this year, like Javon Bennett kind of step up. But, Malachi Smith is a leader on this team. He's a physical guard. I mean, we saw it all throughout last year. He was one of their leading scorers when he was on the court, I believe, throughout conference play specifically. I remember him dropping 21 against Loyola Chicago last year. So he can score it in droves when they're not necessarily getting those contributions from the guard play. And I think he's a leader of this offense, averaging something like 5.5 assists throughout the course of his college career. I know he's still a pretty young guy and obviously wasn't really on the court this year and missed a handful of games last year. But he's a guy who can lead the offense, especially when things are kind of scrambled for Dayton, like we saw in the A10 championship, Sam. You talk about how Duquesne was kind of able to just lock them down defensively. And you think a guy like Malachi Smith kind of provides a little bit of sustainability to the offense. He's able to calm things down and run it from a standpoint when maybe Dayton isn't able to find anything outside of Deron Holmes, kind of just working it inside.
Yeah. And then in another mid-major team, Charleston. They're taking on Alabama. Charleston's the 13 seed. Alabama's the 4 seed. You alluded to, to us in our notes, some potential storylines here with Aaron Estrada. Could you kind of give some more detail on that?
Yeah, I mean, so Aaron Estrada, former CAA Player of the Year at Hofstra last year, had a ton of great battles against Charleston. I mean, specifically, you look at last year, they end up finishing co-regular season champs. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but they go on to meet in the finals. And Charleston ends up winning out to kind of end off Estrada's career at Hofstra last year. But now here he is transferring to Alabama this year, ideally trying to raise his draft stock, get an opportunity with a higher level program. He's getting another opportunity to match up against a really good Charleston team that still has some holdover talent from last year. Guys like Rain Smith, Ante Brozovic, Ben Burnham has been vastly improved this year. And I know Pat Kelsey has been big on getting him minutes and getting him involved. But the storyline there being, Aaron Estrada is going to get a chance to finally get a win in a postseason win over this Charleston team late into his career here. I think it's a good matchup potentially for Charleston. They probably are, against an Alabama team, I think that has a lot of talent. Obviously, Estrada is the main guy, but you talk about Mark Sears, who can certainly score with the best of them in the nation. I think he's proven that throughout the year. You talk about Grant Nelson, who I know has throughout the year has been a potential NBA talent people have talked about. So I think it's a tough matchup for Charleston, but they have a ton of depth, a ton of versatility. They have guys who can guard a lot of different positions. I mean, Ben Burnham, Frankie Policelli. And I think that depth bodes well, but it's going to be a tough matchup against a really scrappy Alabama team that has some really good guards and can be physical on the interior as well.
Yeah, Estrada was last year's Haggerty Award winner, for those of you outside the Northeast might not know, that is the award awarded by the Metropolitan Basketball Writers Association for the top player in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut metro area. Obviously, there's a lot of talent in this region. Chris, are there any other star players that you feel like people should keep an eye out for, both for their individual performances and how they can carry their team into the further rounds of this tournament?
Yeah, you guys hit on most of them. One guy, my favorite guy to watch in this region, and I know Mr. DeRosa would probably agree with me, is Aiden Mahaney at St. Mary's. He's fantastic. St. Mary's had a really rough start of the year and rough non-con, and they really found their footing in West Coast Conference play, won the conference. Mahaney is a guard that I think will have a very, very bright future ahead of him in the NBA.
Awesome. Josh, you got a guy?
Yeah, from Mississippi State, which we're not talking a lot about, Josh Hubbard. Dude's like 5'10", listed. He's probably more like 5'9", but you're talking about a small guard that works off of ball screens, and he doesn't need much daylight. He's got incredible lift on his jump shot, and he's another one of those flamethrowers that when he sees the ball going once, he's liable to run off an 18, 19-point spurt by himself, most of them threes, but he can put the ball on the deck, get to the rim for a small guard. He's tough as nails. He's one of those guys that, again, could be like a March legend. And if Mississippi State can win a couple games in this thing, he can go nuclear. We've seen it when Kentucky played there about a month ago. We've seen it throughout the course of the year. The dude's the state of Mississippi's all-time leading scorer, scored like 4,000 career points. And this year as a freshman, it just came in and lit it up for the Bulldogs. It's a very interesting matchup with Michigan State. I could actually see them winning that, get to North Carolina, and Josh Hubbard put on a show. That's a name to watch out for because win or lose, he's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and that's a name to watch actually first in this year's tournament because as Peyton just let me know, tip times were just released for the first and second rounds, and Mississippi State versus Michigan State is actually going to be the first game of the first round. All right, guys, we just went through all four regions. Great job, and thank you again to our 864 viewers. Let's get into something that I think a lot of people are waiting for. Obviously, I'm a guy. I get so wrapped up in matchups and statistics and history that it takes me way longer than I'm comfortable to admit to make my bracket. Hopefully, anybody that's using Rithmm will have a little bit of a quicker time. But let's just kind of go around the horn and give me your gut picks for this year's Final Four. So give me your 4 teams, and then who beats who in the championship. Chris, you want to lead us off here?
Yeah, certainly still kind of working through things, but my first reaction when I saw it was UConn out of the East there, and then lower left portion of the bracket will go Arizona, followed by Houston and Creighton. Also, since I missed it, one quick shout to Yale for me out of the Eastern half. I think they beat Auburn and beat San Diego State and go to the Sweet 16. All right, moving on.
Oh, bad.
Couldn't be the guy that has Azar Swain enthusiast in his bio.
Right.
Wow. All right.
Couldn't be him.
All right. Riley, any preliminary picks here?
Well, I'm certainly, like I said before, kind of here to be the mid-major analyst, but just kind of initial thoughts. I really like UConn out of the East region there. Maybe a little bit selfishly, I'm going to pick Alabama out of the West. I think they could give some teams some tough times and could cause some problems against an Arizona team kind of late there in the bracket. Looking at the top, I mean, I like Marquette if Tyler Kolek is healthy. Duke's been a little too shaky for me, so I think maybe I'd have to go with the Houston or Marquette out of there, depending on what Tyler Kolek looks like, as we discussed earlier. And then looking at the bottom half, I really like this Tennessee team. I mean, Dalton Knecht has just been incredible all year. He's been just awesome to watch, and I think he could really carry this team past Purdue.
Great stuff. Jake, your gut check Final Four.
Oh man, let me put the disclaimer: total subject to change, and have not used the Rithmm AI bracket generator just yet. I certainly will be doing that, but UConn, Baylor out of the West. Oh man, top corner's tough, man. In the South, I take Wisconsin sleeper out of the South. And then in the Midwest, I take I really do like Tennessee there out of the Midwest. So yeah, it's going to be a real tough bracket. Subject to further change. I need to sit with that, see what the Rithmm algorithms have to say for me. But man, it's really hard to not put UConn in the championship game here for me personally. Really difficult.
Josh, people are liking UConn. How you feeling about them and your other 3 teams?
So I've said on record from basically December on that UConn is the only team that has no weakness. So I'm going to ride with them as well. I mean, they could have some pitfalls we've talked about, but I'm going UConn out of the East. In the West, I think things could get really wacky, and I actually kind of think it lines up perfect for a Baylor run because their offense is so damn good. And Scott Drew's been there before. I like Baylor coming out of the West. In the Midwest, again, I think it comes down to Purdue and Tennessee. I don't know how healthy Kansas will be at all. They could be a potential, get Purdue in the Sweet 16. Creighton, I don't like their bench depth. So I'll go Tennessee. I think Tennessee gets the rematch over Purdue. And in the South, my heart, who I want to say. I want to say the Cats make it.
Do it.
But unfortunately, I'm going to say, you want me to?
No, I really don't. I don't.
No,
I want you to. I really don't. I want you to go whatever you
Put
think.
it on the record. Put it on the record, Josh. Put it on the record, man.
I was going to say Marquette.
Oh.
Because their experience, I was going to say, and they would beat Kentucky in the Sweet 16, but you talked me into it. How can I go against my Cats? I do think the offense is elite enough. Listen, I do think their offense is elite enough. The game changes once you get to March. The games are called different, and if you allow teams to play with Kentucky, again, that offense can put spurts on you. You're going to have to score 90 to beat them. So I'll do it. I'll be the one that takes them coming out of the South. Kentucky.
Trevor, I didn't think we'd be getting a visit from Emperor Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith tonight, but that was great. Coercing Josh to lean towards Kentucky here.
He knows how to get me going. I know how to get him going. That's what happens when you do pods with him for over a year. All right, so
well, let's get into Peyton. I'm going to go Peyton.
Sorry.
If you want to go through your picks first here.
Oh my God. From here on till about 5 p.m. Eastern time, once myself, Josh, Trevor, and Phil and Delessa do our preview for tomorrow's pod, this is probably going to change over 50 plus times from here on to there because I don't know. UConn's the only thing I'm really comfortable in. I think they win the East. I think Houston wins the South. Going to the West, You can't always go all chalk, and I just mentioned it. If they can beat North Carolina in the second round, it would not shock me if Michigan State gets to the Final Four. Got good guards, and they got Tom Izzo. You know what? I'm going crazy. Michigan State gets to the Final Four, they win the West. Midwest, I so badly want to pick Kansas, but we are just not healthy whatsoever. If we had Remy Martin on this team, then 100% I'd pick Kansas because that means we'd have someone on the bench who's capable of doing something, unlike Nick Timberlake. I think Tennessee gets it done. They got the best player in the country, and Dalton Connect. Zach Edey's the most dominant, but he's not the best. That goes to Dalton Connect. I really like their guards, and I think they go to the Final Four, and I think UConn cuts the nets down and again beats Tennessee in the final.
Love it. Trevor, can we use some Jedi mind tricks to sway you towards your Wolfpack, or do you feel like you've got 4 other teams that you think will make it through?
Unfortunately for me and all of Wolfpack Nation, I do actually have a double-digit seed making the Final Four out of one region. I'm the only person to do that so far. Again, I have not actually filled out a bracket yet, so none of this is matchup-based. But I'll just get to it. In the Midwest, I have Tennessee out of the Final Four there. I have New Mexico making out of the West. I alluded to it earlier how ridiculous of a bracket that is. If there was ever a place for a seed that high to make it, I think New Mexico is underseeded unbelievably. They're one of the hottest teams in the country coming out of that region. So in the Midwest and the West, I have Tennessee, New Mexico squaring off in the Final Four. And then I went a little chalkier on the other side. Well, completely chalkier if you're thinking Tennessee's a 2 there. UConn, Houston out of the East and the South. There has not been a better chance since 2007 for a team to go back-to-back. I know it's pretty much been said all year, but I think it's true. I think about every champion we've had since 2007 when Florida went back-to-back. We really haven't had like an unreal chance of a team that just feels this good. I walked out of Houston last year on Monday and was like, I don't know how the heck that team gets back, but if they do, they're going to be unreal. And I said it verbatim to everybody I was with. I just don't know how UConn, if they can figure out how to reload, and they 100% did. They brought some incredible pieces back. They brought some incredible pieces in that they are obviously going to miss from last year. And look, again, I alluded to it with the Midwest there. I don't think there's anybody better in the West, in the West that could do it. So I shook it up there. I have UConn, Houston, Tennessee, New Mexico, and I would have Tennessee and UConn in the final. I know that's been picked already, but I do really think if those 4 teams make the Final Four, that's probably what happens. And I think UConn wins a very close game against Tennessee in the national championship game, alluding to what I said earlier. And I think UConn goes back-to-back for the first time since 2007.
Great stuff. Mr. DeRosa, what you got for us?
Yeah, I think every single person picked UConn. I will not be picking UConn. I want to give a preliminary shout out. I'm not picking this team. I just want to give a quick shout out to my Mighty Mormons, King Khalifa and co. They could win a game of the tournament. They're not beating Illinois, but it'd be fun if they did. I'm going to go with Auburn. I said Auburn earlier, and straight up with the fact that every single person picked UConn, and most of them picked UConn to win the title, I think if you want to win your bracket pool and a big bracket pool, you're kind of going to have to pick against UConn and just hope you go right. So I'm going to go with Auburn to make the Final Four there. Go to the South. I actually think this region really opens up for Houston. I think, honestly, Kentucky and Marquette are both good matchups for Houston, and I don't think a Duke tests them. So I'm going to go Houston there. Midwest, I think every single person picked Tennessee. I actually agree. I think it really opens up for Tennessee. And then out West, I'm going to go with Arizona. Give me Arizona losing to Houston in the title game. Bang. PRP.
Great stuff. I'm going to go with, I had all this time and I'm still having trouble with it. I think I'm going to, disagree with you, Michael, on the East. I think UConn is just really too strong right now. But I'm going to agree with you here on Houston. I feel like what you were talking about, especially, in terms of the region opening up for Houston, I think it's really important, specifically with a lot of these matchups, right? The top 5 seeds here, they're playing against, I think they all have a chance. They're all highly likely to win and move on to the second round at least. They are going to be playing high-quality mid-major schools. Those kinds of games can really beat a lot out of you, and they're going to be really exhausted, and Houston is going to have not the easiest path, but they're going to be, getting a slight edge against some really good teams in the South. In the Midwest, I don't know why this team is really calling to me that much, but I feel like I really want to go with the Creighton Blue Jays here at the 3 seed. I like their path. I like the way that the bracket's kind of shaken out for them. So I'm going to go for, this Big East powerhouse out of the Midwest. And then finally for the West, I really want to roll Arizona here. I know they kind of came up short in the Pac-12 tournament, but I think they're going to be a really fun team. So I think I'm going to go with the Wildcats. And once again, I believe UConn is going to win once again, like Florida did in the 2000s, back-to-back titles over the Houston Cougars. So that wraps it up, guys. We just went through the entire bracket. Trevor, you got a final point here for us.
I told you I had one question that I wanted to get to if we had time, and I know we're
on
the 130 clip, and I think some people alluded to some stuff. I would like to I'll throw out really quick. What is everyone's storyline that they want to happen? Obviously, think of like UNC Duke playing in the Final Four. That was a huge storyline. It could have happened Coach Shay's final year, right? I know Estrada was a big one with Alabama and some other matchups there against Charleston. I know that there's some really great storylines. The one I'll give you, and I know it's probably going to be one where everybody's going to have to scramble really fast, but I'll kind of give you one to set the tone, is that Caleb Love and RJ Davis potential matchup. And I knew you were going to – look, I knew Michael was in on it, but look, people were texting me all week like, it's going to happen, 1 versus 2. They're going to put them in the same part of the bracket. It's going to fall that perfect way, even if I think Tennessee might have been more worthy over North Carolina slightly. Regardless, what's everyone's favorite storyline? I know that's something that might get missed in this. Obviously, we are, at the end of the day, media people, and we do storylines, ultimately for a living and for content. So what's everyone's favorite storyline? Mine is RJ Davis and Caleb Love.
Yep, I'll go first on this one. I have 3 of them. That was one of them, so you already took that from me. I'll go ahead and save a couple more because I feel like Josh is going to mention the other one I was talking about. But we go to the Midwest. If we look at coaches, who in these coaches, who has the most to prove in March? Outside of maybe John Calipari, because BBN and the media is crazy about him. Obviously, he needs to prove it. Hasn't done it in a while. The 2 most coaches with the most pressure in March right now is in the same region, and they can match up in the Elite 8. Matt Painter and Rick Barnes for a chance to go to the Final Four, number 1 seed taking on number 2 seed, the most dominant player in the country, and Zach Edey against the best player in the country, Dalton Connect. They've already played this matchup earlier in the season. I would eat that thing up, baby, and I think Tennessee would win that game, but I'm just saying those 2 coaches have the most to gain, the most to prove out of any coaches in this tournament, period, and you got the 2 best players. That's my number 1.
If no one else has anything,
I love that.
Go Josh.
Oh, sorry. There must have been a lag there. I love that one. But selfish reasons and historical purposes. You know me. I've followed the sport my entire life, been a coach, player, everything, media person now for the last 6 years. If they're in the same region. If it shakes down to get an Elite 8 between the Duke Blue Devils and the Kentucky Wildcats, you think about 1992, Christian Laettner's shot. You think about 1998, when Kentucky was down 17 to Duke in an Elite 8 game in St. Pete, Tampa, Florida, and he raced a 17-point lead behind Scott Padgett 3-point shot late and went on to win a national title. They should have met in 2010 in the Final Four, and West Virginia screwed it up. They should have met in the 2015 national title game, and Wisconsin screwed it up. Give me Duke. Give me Kentucky, Elite 8, winner goes to the Final Four. Hose me down, baby, because I'm ready.
Love it. DeRosa, what you got for us?
Yeah, I think honestly, a very interesting. This is fairly boring pick, but UConn dealing with from going to be the hunter to the hunted immediately. Let's say these 2 teams win in the first round. They got to play a team in the that they could have played in the Final Four last year in FAU. Then there's a chance they got to play a team they played last year in the national title game in San Diego State, or Auburn, another very tough matchup. Just the fact that UConn's road actually isn't all that easy. Like Illinois, that team is incredibly talented. Iowa State, they play a really interesting style. Just the fact of UConn going from the hunter, a team that was 4 seed, they felt disrespected, to being the hunted, a team that everyone looked at, watched all season, and said, we got to be better than them. That makes it a lot. That makes a pretty significant difference. I want to see if UConn's ready for that.
I've got something to interject here very briefly. This Wisconsin James Madison matchup, great guard 6 and 5 in a Division I tournament, right? He's 3-1 in the NIT. I think Wisconsin got very close to the NIT, if not won it. I don't know. Lots at stake for a great guard's reputation. Let me just throw this out. right? Like I don't know if a first round loss cancels Greg Gard. I don't think that's worthy. I'm not going to be like that guy of Greg Gard should get fired at Wisconsin. He's had a lot of 20 straight win seasons. You got to start thinking like they brought Greg Gard in to replace Bo Ryan at Wisconsin. And I think they expected excellence in Wisconsin. How far does Wisconsin get this year is what is the big question for me this year. So I don't know. That could go a lot of different ways, but Greg Gard's reputation is a sort of a residual effect of how this tournament shakes out. And that's how I'll leave this year.
Yeah, fantastic. Riley, you're a mid-major man here. What is your pick for a top mid-major story for fans to watch out for?
Man, I think some of the more exciting. I think Drake is a really exciting program who could potentially make an interesting run. Obviously, Tucker DeVries and his father Darian kind of leading that team forward. It creates a ton of interesting storylines, and they'll get some interesting matchups out of that side of the bracket. They could definitely beat a Washington State team early in the rounds. They could definitely put up a solid performance against Iowa State. And I feel like with Tucker DeVries in your lineup, you can never really count them out. But the big storyline for me is which team is going to follow up FAU this year with a big mid-major run. And I think, the secret here is it's definitely not going to be the Owls this year. So who do we have to look out for? And I think Drake is definitely one we're going to want to keep an eye on.
Great stuff.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that really quick, that Drake-Iowa State potential matchup in round 2, they're both, in Ames and Des Moines. They go right across the river, the Missouri River, over to Omaha for the game. I think that'll be the most raucous crowd environment in the first round. Both of those fan bases will travel really well, and Omaha has a lot of ties to both of those programs. Greg McDermott, who's the coach of Creighton, coached at Iowa State beforehand. Tucker DeVries was an assistant coach at Creighton before he went to Drake. I think both of those fan bases will get very much into that one and will travel well.
I've got
Fantastic
one more.
stuff.
What
you got, Josh?
Who can be an FAU, and that's Morehead State. I love the matchup against Illinois. We got to see, Peyton and I covered the OVC title game. We talked to their starting point guard, Drew Thelwell, on a YouTube exclusive. This is a team that controls tempo, but they can run opportunity-wise off of long rebounds and misses, and they've got an absolute star the world to get to know in Riley Minix. The drops 20, can get 10 rebounds every night. He's such a Dirk Nowitzki type player when he goes to the mid-post back down. Those are tough matchups for Illinois as a 3-14. If they win that game, that would put them who against? Play the winner of BYU Duquesne. I'm telling you, if Morehead State can get by Illinois, they can win that next one, put them Sweet 16. They could beat either Iowa State, Drake, Washington State. Now they're in the Elite Eight. Morehead State is a real possibility to beat this year's FAU because they've got a good point guard. They've got opportunity shooters. They control tempo. They're a good offensive rebounding team, and they've got an absolute star in Riley Minix. Do not sleep on Morehead State in this tournament.
Fantastic. I think for mine, I'm going to have to go with – I just really want to see what NC State does in this first round. I think there's a lot – oh, no, we lost Trevor. I think there was a lot of people talking about, first of all, how great this run was, but especially about how runs like this can often lead to a team being pretty tired in their first game. Obviously, they've got a good couple days of rest here, but that momentum, that pressure can really get to some teams. And it's just really fun when they kind of defy that and then still get that first round win. I think a notable example, if we can go to mid-majors, was Richmond, right? They came out of nowhere in the 2022 Atlantic 10 tournament down in D.C., and then they got the 12 seed. They upset Iowa in the first round, and that was just it was beyond fantastic. So, again, a lot of really great stuff. This is I think that's going to wrap it up for our 2024 House of College Hoops bracket special. Guys, I know we gave a little bit of a quick silent round of applause for Grambling State, but I want to do it again one more time for our 936 listeners. So thank you guys again. This has been one of the biggest shows in the history of House of College Hoops, in the history of houseenterprise.com. And if you want to keep checking us out, make sure you check out house-enterprise.com. That's where all of our blogs are housed, all of our podcasts are housed. We've got so much great content from the past couple weeks or so, and so much more on the way as this tournament kicks off. Make sure you also check out Mid-Major Madness and anything that Riley Frayne is on. Riley, could you kind of plug your stuff and let us know where we can find you?
Yeah, of course. So you just check me out on Twitter at Riley Frayne. I do a ton of mid-major coverage with SB Nation's Mid-Major Madness, like Sam did. We just wrapped up some great coverage at the A10 tournament today, and I'll be in Brooklyn and Boston for the first and second round and Sweet 16 and Elite 8, hopefully covering a couple of mid-major programs. So yeah, you can check me out on Twitter at Riley Frayne, RILEYFRAIN. If you want to check out any of my stuff, definitely stop by.
All right. And I think that's going to be it for us, for our crew. Make sure, I'm going to take a little bit of a second if we can get those names back up on the screen. Check out all these handles. Make sure you're following everybody. Chris, Riley, Peyton, Josh, Jake, Trevor, Michael, and me. I've been Sam Basil. This has been House of College Hoops. And until next time, we'll see you guys.